Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Chris Beat Cancer podcast. This is actually episode 2. So if you're listening to this, maybe you listened to episode 1. By the way, episode 1, thank you. I'm thanking you because episode 1 in the first 3 days went to number 1 in iTunes Health and made it up to, as far as I could tell, number 36 in iTunes overall of all podcasts, which is unbelievable. I mean, it's really pretty freaking cool. So thank you so much for tuning in and for sharing it and for listening. So anyway, podcast number 2 is going to be a Q&A. I posted on Facebook, asked my fans and friends and followers to submit their questions. And so we are going to do a long Q&A session right now. So I get asked this all the time. Are you vegan? Do you eat a whole food plant-based diet? What's your diet like now? I'm not vegan. I do eat a whole food plant-based diet, and here's what it's like. My diet's about 98% plant-based, and I eat tons of fruit, tons of vegetables. It includes the starchy vegetables that so many people are so terrified of. It even includes some grains. Also, many people terrified of grains right now. So let me take you through a day. Now, I made a video, by the way. It's called What I Ate Today. I'll put a link in the show notes, and it'll show you a couple of these recipes because I eat oatmeal every morning for breakfast. That recipe's in the video. I eat a giant smoothie for lunch every day. That recipe's in the video. And then dinner, we mix it up. So the oatmeal has, of course, organic quick oats. It has hemp seed, flaxseed, chia seed, almond butter, berries. I might do blueberries or raspberries or dried cranberries or dried apricots. I'll sweeten it with date sugar and blackstrap molasses, which are the 2 highest antioxidant sweeteners. Plus, they provide a lot of really good minerals like iron in blackstrap molasses. Lunch is a giant smoothie with 3 cups of frozen berries, blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, strawberries, cherries. I'm eating mangoes right now in my smoothie. I'll throw a couple mangoes in there. I'll throw 2 big handfuls of leafy greens from the garden. Right now we've got a lot of Swiss chard growing in the tower garden. If you don't know what that is, I'll put a link in the show notes. And I'll put hemp seed again and almonds and walnuts and even apricot kernels in the smoothie. I'll put a teaspoon of turmeric powder, and just other stuff. Whatever I've got handy, I'll throw in there. So that's lunch. And then again, I said dinner, we mix it up. So dinner is lots of starches. So we may have a salad, but then also sweet potato or white potatoes or new potatoes. We'll have beans and rice. So we'll do maybe brown rice, red rice, or black rice. Red rice and black rice have much higher antioxidant content than brown. So I encourage you to check them out. I love the taste of red rice and black rice. And we'll do black beans, we'll do green beans, we'll do garbanzo beans, we'll do black-eyed peas, we'll do white beans, we'll do lentils, love lentils. We will have quinoa. We will have lots of cooked and steamed vegetables, depending on, it might be asparagus or cauliflower or broccoli or spinach, mustard greens, collard greens. So if it's a vegetable, we'll eat it, pretty much. The only vegetable I really do not like, there's 2. I really don't like okra. I just don't. That's me. And I'm not crazy about radishes, but radishes are really good. That spiciness is really wonderful for you, but I've just never been crazy about radishes. Okay, as for protein, I eat very little dairy. I did experiment with dairy consumption, with drinking a lot of raw milk at one point just to see how it would affect me, and eating raw cheese and lots of eggs. That was an experimental phase I did a couple of years ago, and it really didn't help me in any way. So I eat very little dairy. I avoid it as much as possible. One of the biggest sources of dietary aluminum is cheese because they use sodium aluminum phosphate, which is a type of salt, in cheese manufacturing to make the cheese smoother and better texture. It's a texturizer, and they don't have to disclose that on the label. They can just call it salt. But cheese is one of the highest sources of aluminum. And so if you eat cheese, raw cheese can be good, but you need to make sure they're not using sodium aluminum phosphate. And the best way to find out is to, go to the Q&A on the cheese company's website, or call them. Just find out. But anyway, not a big cheese eater, not a milk drinker anymore. And as far as animal protein, wild-caught salmon is my protein of choice. I think the best place to get it is Vital Choice. I'll put a link to them. They have the highest standards for contaminant testing, Fukushima radiation testing, mercury testing in their wild-caught Alaskan salmon. They also distribute a lot of wild-caught fish besides salmon, and they have grass-fed beef and chicken and some other things too. I think they maybe have some supplements, but I've never tried those. But that's that's the most reliable source I've seen if you are really conscientious about the quality of animal protein you eat, especially wild-caught salmon. I think they're top of the game, doing basically just have a world-class operation up there. So a few times a week, that puts my diet at about 95, 97, 98% plant-based. So 2 servings a week. Okay, now, but occasionally I will have grass-fed beef or chicken or lamb. So I don't eat scavengers. I mean, when I say I can't remember the last time I had shrimp. Pork, I think I eat pork maybe once a year. I might eat some pork just because, live in Memphis, barbecue, just I might be somewhere and be like, yeah, I'm going to have some pork. But yeah, it's like once a year. But generally speaking, scavengers are not healthy meats. They're the least healthy, most unhealthy meats, and I think you should avoid them, and they should not be a part of your regular diets. That includes bacon. If you're paleo, I've got some bad news for you. Your ancestors did not eat bacon. Bacon is loaded with sodium. It's like a sodium bomb. It's super bad. And it's smoked. A lot of bacon. I mean, the smoke that's in bacon is carcinogenic. Whether they use liquid smoke, which is like fake smoke, or where they actually smoke it in a smokehouse, any smoked meat is loaded with carcinogens. So, don't eat bacon. I know how much you love it, but I don't eat it. So anyway, next question. What are my thoughts on the traditional diet, aka Nourishing Traditions, and Sally Fallon, that she promotes for cancer prevention? And the person that asked this question said, I've read many opposing viewpoints in regards to this diet. Thank you. Okay, so this is the Weston Price Diet. And I have great respect for Weston Price. I think people that follow Weston Price generally are smart people, and they're concerned about their health, and they're making good choices compared to eating a Western diet. But I do have some problems with it. One is Weston Price traveled around the world. I guess it was around the 1930s. He wrote Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. I've read the book. And the thing about the book is, he found all these indigenous peoples, and they were, quote unquote, healthier, right? They had better teeth. They were physically fit. They weren't overweight. And they weren't eating a Western diet, and they were eating, locally sourced meat and raw dairy, and of course, vegetables and fruit that they grew. And so he was trying to educate the public that the best health comes from eating like a whole foods type diet, which I agree with. But I think we've carried it a little bit too far, and I think a lot of the people following the Weston Price movement, I guess you could call it, eat way too many animal products. Way too much meat, way too much dairy, and I see this over and over again. The Maasai tribe in Africa, they consume a ton of raw milk and blood, and look how healthy they are. Well, no, they aren't. They aren't healthy. They have very short lifespans. So that's not a tribe, that's not a diet you'd want to mimic. You'd want to mimic the diet of people that have excellent health and long lifespans. Because most young people have pretty good health, right? So, except for me, colon cancer 26. And then again, the other one, it's been debunked, is the Eskimos, the Inuits. Oh, look how much fat they ate, and they're so healthy. But the truth is, they have very short lifespans. These are not people whose diet you want to emulate, okay? And that's regardless of their harsh environment they live in, okay? So what we do have, and And by the way, Weston Price, he just did an observational study. It's just like basically one guy who lived, might spend a week or two with, this little indigenous tribe here and this other little tribe there and people around the world. And then, you can't draw big conclusions when you just spend a little bit of time with a group of people. But since then, we've had many large-scale population studies on people groups around the world. And what they've found is that the healthiest, longest living people eat a plant-based diet. They're not vegan, but they eat mostly plants. And usually it's because of the availability, right? People that are living in rural areas, rural parts of Africa, India, China, Southeast Asia, the Mediterranean, Okinawa, these people are eating mostly plants and mostly starches, rice and beans and potatoes. Okay, very little animal products because animal food is expensive. And when you live in a rural area, there's no grocery stores, and the only place you're going to get meat is from an animal that you killed or your neighbor killed. And even the hunter-gatherer populations that still exist today in remote parts of the world don't eat meat every day because it's hard to catch and kill an animal every day. So they might eat meat once a week, once every few weeks, once a month. They subsist on the starches. So starches is what will keep you alive and healthy. Tons of fiber, tons of energy, and of course vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, etc. Okay, now that brings us to the other controversial issue, which is phytates. So I have a question here. Are phytates and phytase really such a huge issue? They are a huge issue. They're definitely, people have made them into a huge issue, but the truth about phytates is phytates, the paleo community, and I think Weston Price as well, say phytates are bad, right? And you need to soak and sprout your beans and stuff like that, or not eat beans in some cases, and soak and sprout nuts to remove phytates and phytic acid. But phytates and phytic acid, which is inositol hexaphosphate, also known as IP6, is awesome. It is a powerful anti-cancer compound. It's an anti-cancer nutrient. Google this. There are tons of studies on PubMed about IP6 as it relates to cancer. You want to eat phytates. They're good. Okay? Phytates are great. I eat loads of phytates from beans and some grains like oats. So, don't be afraid of phytates. The other thing that people say about phytates is that they leach minerals and they block the absorption of minerals in your body. While that may be true to some small extent, and it might be a concern for people who are malnourished, if you are not malnourished, you will not have mineral depletion or malnutrition. I should look at the last video I posted with my latest blood work, okay? And I show you all the mineral levels in my blood. I eat tons of phytates. There is no mineral deficiency in my blood, okay? So if you're not sure if phytates are going to harm you, you can do the same thing. You can eat tons of beans and rice and some grains if they agree with you, and get your blood tested after 30 days, and I think you'll probably see the same thing that I saw. It didn't make any difference at all. So I think phytates are great. So obviously the leaching minerals thing, not something you need to worry about. And the healthiest people around the world eat tons of beans with the longest lifespans, and they contain powerful anti-cancer compounds, namely IP6, inositol hexaphosphate. Okay, next question is, I'm wanting to prevent getting cancer, but I need a list, a diet plan, if you could call it that. What should I be eating and what supplements will help? Well, what I've been talking about is the same diet, that I think you should eat. You should eat a plant-based diet because the healthiest people around the world eat plant-based diets. Tons of fruits and vegetables, raw and cooked, very little meat and dairy. Some people thrive. Some people cut out all meat and dairy and they do really well and they thrive. Some people go all raw and they do really well and they thrive. But some people need a little bit of meat, a little bit of animal protein in their diet. And so I think, again, if it's under 5% of your total calories, I don't think it'll harm you at all, and it might be helpful. So that's the way I think most people need to eat. There's always exceptions, so don't send me messages saying, "Oh no, I can't eat that," or whatever. I understand there's exceptions, but what I'm talking about is based on the most compelling research that has been published about the healthiest people around the world. Now, here's something else that's fascinating. Back to the Weston Price issue. One thing I forgot to mention. So there's a sort of there's an idea that we should return to our roots and eat like our ancestors, eat like we did in 1900 when we were, an agrarian society and there was no processed food and no fast food. And it's true, in 1900, the rates of cancer and heart disease were much lower, and diabetes and other things too. But when you compare the rates of disease in Americans in 1900 to the rural Africans in 1960s, so it's over 60 years later, they were even healthier than we were in 1900. And the rural Africans subsisted on rice and potatoes and starches and very little meat and dairy. Okay, this is the if you look at the work of Dr. Dennis Burkitt, he's just I'm a huge fan of the work he did and the studies that he published in the 60s with regard to the diets of the rural Africans. And in fact, recently there was a study that was published where they took rural Africans, one group of rural Africans, and they took a group of African Americans, and it was called the African Diet Swap. So they took these two groups and they swapped their diets. So the rural Africans started eating American food, African Americans started eating the rural Africans' diet, which is, again, like lentils and peas and beans and corn. It's basically a starch-based diet. And then they checked their blood. They did blood work to see if there would any changes would happen. And what they found was when the African Americans started eating the rural African diet, their blood work got healthier. And when the rural Africans started eating the Americans' diet, their blood work got worse. And their cancer markers went up, like precursors to colon cancer, for example. So I'll put a link to that study. It's fascinating, and it's another one of many, many, many examples that are pointing to the healthiest diet being starch-based, very little meat and dairy, and of course, mostly plants. Okay. This question is: have you found that eating a good fat with each meal helps the body hold on to nutrients better? I don't know. I don't know that that's true. I can tell you what my macronutrient breakdown is. I eat about 65% carbohydrates, mostly starches and fruit. I eat about 20 to 25% fat, so that's nuts and seeds, and avocados, occasional coconuts, and 10 to 15% protein, mostly plant-based protein. And that's not protein powders, that's just the protein that exists in all plant food, but especially beans have really high protein, so does quinoa, but amino acids are in all food. They're in all fruits and all vegetables, and your body takes those amino acids and uses them to assemble the proteins that you need at any given time. So I eat a lot of fat, but I avoid oils. Another question is, what's the best cooking oil? Well, coconut oil and olive oil are the best cooking oils in my opinion, but we use very, very little oils. Oils are highly processed food. An oil is not really a natural food. It's processed. I mean, it takes a lot of energy and effort to extract oils from olives or from coconuts, and oils are the most highly concentrated food on earth. And I avoid oils as much as possible. So we might cook with a little oil here and there, but most of the food I eat, I don't put oil on it. Okay, back in 2004, I put a lot of olive oil on my anti-cancer salad. I still think olive oil is good, but in very small amounts. You just don't need very much oil. Okay, what do you feed your kids? All right. Okay, so I wish I could say that my kids were like these ultra healthy kids and all they wanted to eat was broccoli and blueberries. But it's not true. They're kids. They were exposed to junk food at an early age, not from us, from grandparents and other kids and whatever. So my kids do make pretty good choices, but they still also want to eat junk food. And if we let them, they probably would eat a lot of junk food. But what we feed them is we try to give them a lot of whole foods, right? We buy lots of whole foods. We don't buy Cokes. We don't buy, fruit roll-ups. Like, we don't buy junk food, okay? So that means we don't have that kind of stuff in the house. And if you don't have it in the house, then it forces them to have to eat something else. So, but my wife will make a breakfast, like they might have granola for breakfast. They might have eggs every once in a while. School lunches might be a peanut butter sandwich and some raspberries and some walnuts or whatever. And my wife, again, she makes her lunches, so I don't know exactly everything they eat. But dinner, they'll eat usually the same thing that Mike and I eat, except they're pickier, so we have to encourage them to try new things. And we have a thing we do called the thank you bite, where if it's a food they've never tried before, or they're like really freaking out about it because they don't like the color or the texture or whatever, then we'll just say, you just have one bite. You only have to have one bite. And they have the bite. We say, thank you for having that bite. Of course, they have to chew it up and swallow it. But I've read somewhere that it takes about seven times to develop a new taste. And so if your kids are really picky and they don't like healthy food, right, whole food, and they just want to eat junk food, you have to keep encouraging them, just one bite at a time, one bite per night or whatever, and eventually their taste buds and their palate will expand. And I mean, we've seen this with our own kids for sure. Their palates have really expanded over the years. And just 2 nights ago, my youngest daughter, who is in first grade, we put some avocados on her plate and she ate some and she said she loved it. So we were like, wow, she likes avocados now. Great, So whereas maybe a few weeks ago she didn't. So just keep encouraging them to eat healthy and whole foods. And you know what healthy foods look like? It's fruits and vegetables. So it's not that difficult. And especially if you stop buying junk food, it becomes a lot easier. Mom, can I have some cookies? No, you can have some grapes, right? You can have some dates. Do you want a banana? How about an apple? We have some oranges. Okay. 2 more questions. My 2-year-old son is having a bone marrow transplant. Of course, he'll need to recover his immune system. They said he can't have raw vegetables or fruit because of potential fungal spores. Prior to this, he ate a lot of them. What food suggestions would you give for him to help healing and keep infection away? Well, this is a very tricky area. Obviously, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nutritionist. But what they're talking about is the neutropenic diet. The neutropenic diet is a diet that's all cooked, where you kill all the bacteria, because someone who is immunocompromised might have a problem with bacteria on fruit or vegetables. So if you want to stay on the safe side, then you need to feed him cooked food. That's fine. Lots of cooked fruits and vegetables. You can cook apples. Apples are delicious cooked. But potatoes, rice, beans, corn, steamed broccoli, steamed cauliflower, all the starches are wonderful. And then any fruit you want to feed them, you could kind of make like a blueberry cobbler, but without a bunch of sugar in it, and cook applesauce. So look at different ways you can cook fruit and vegetables. And believe it or not, cooking doesn't destroy the nutritional value of fruits and vegetables. It lowers it a little bit. You might lose about 15% of water-soluble vitamins and or minerals. But it doesn't destroy the nutritional value. So, for for 2-year-olds are not that picky anyway. I mean, so I would just try to make as much like cooked mush as you can and feed it to him. If it was my child, that's what I would do. Okay. All right. So we're right at the 24-minute mark. I think that's a good place to stop this Q&A. And thanks so much for listening. And I'll follow up with more Q&As. They're coming, so stay tuned for that. Please subscribe to my channel. Of course, there's tons of resources on chrisbeatcancer.com. And subscribe to the podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. And so that's it. Again, thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next one.